Hey everybody, Sayre at Nova, and this week we're talking about a fairly modern bike considering what we normally talk about, but one that definitely has retro roots and some vintage roots in it. This is a 2017 Ducati Scrambler 800cc, and this is a bike that I sort of struggle with in general. As my old time in this industry has happened, I've seen the custom world kind of go from the world of cafe racers and morph into street trackers, flat track replicas and things, and scramblers and stuff. And the modern retro market has kind of done the same thing. And I kind of get annoyed by it. I kind of don't like it. But there's a point where you can't fight it all. You got to let the butter cut the knife sometimes and just go with it. So the reality is, it's a great motorcycle. It's their 800cc air cooled two valve head, which is basically the same thing you're going to find in the Ducati Monsters. Dates back to the 80s rubber band engines. The belt driven versus was the first evolution away from the bevel driven cams, and so there's still kind of the remnants of that here. It's tried and true motor, makes a ton of power, and for what it is, and it's reliable. They have it tuned, and what else can you say? I've always, it's a funny thing. I do a little research on this before we want to talk about this. I've always assumed that this is sort of a budget bike, and I don't know why I thought that, because it's not. It's comparable, maybe a little bit cheaper than the Bonneville for the base models, but the new models of these bikes are 1100cc, go up. You can spend almost 20 grand on one, and that's definitely not a cheap bike anymore. And that's one of the reasons why I've sort of kept a negative opinion of them, is that like a Ducati Monster, it's a really interesting bike. It's a really good bike, but if you approach it as a budget bike, you are going to have a very hard time. The maintenance on a Ducati, on a Desmo Ducati, is expensive. Those belts I just mentioned, they have to get replaced every 2 years. I think they stretched it now to 5 years because people complain so much, and you can get 5 years out of them. But if a bike sits for more than a couple of years, those belts become suspect because they harden, like a belt drive on a final drive on a Harley or something. They harden in position, and when they start moving, they start to crack, and that can be a problem. So as long as it's used regularly, 5 years, no problem. Or the mileage, which you have to check the service specs, but there's a mileage spec for it as well. But the belts are simple. The valves, on the other hand, are very expensive. Most shops charge $1,500 or so for a two-cylinder valve check and adjustment on a Desmo bike. Depending on, if you come to us, we try to be nice. We try to, bill real time on it. We can get away with it for a little bit less, but it's not cheap. And you got, you have two adjusters. There's shim. There's no screwing happening at all. So you have to measure shim, measure again, turn the motor over a few times, and be sure not to drop the valve into the engine as you do it, because you have to basically disassemble the valve from its keeper to do all this. So it takes a while. And for perspective, the valve adjustments on a, just say a Honda, what's the Honda 900s, totally blanking on the name of what I'm trying to say there, but any of the Japanese, universal Japanese retro bikes, valve adjustment is maybe 3-4 hours, whereas so that's $500-600 versus this is almost 3 times that. So it's a lot, and that's my downside to it. Now, as I've said, I had it wrong on this bike. This is not a budget bike. You wouldn't approach this trying to save money, perhaps. It's not your Royal Enfield, no shade on Enfield. It's definitely something that's more exclusive with the Ducati name on it. And it's, you get a lot of bike for that. You have, as you would expect from a Ducati, top of the line suspension, top of the line brakes, upside down forks up front, very light wheels, cast wheels, and it's called a Scrambler. This version, I'm forgetting what version this is, but this is a particular version. There's actually like 8 versions of the Scrambler. This is definitely a more cafe racer / sport bike oriented trim package. So you have these sport bike wheels on it and clip-on handlebars up here to go with the upside down fork. So this is meant to be something that you're gonna ride on the street, and I would say the Scrambler is just a model name only on this one. But it doesn't take away from what it is. And the other versions of the Scramblers, have higher bars, and they're more, and not the sort of cafe seat here, and they're more suited towards off-road riding, or a Scrambler. Really, the original Scrambler that came out of the 60s and early 70s of riding was the first dual sport. So it was a bike that was not meant to really be ridden off-road, but it was a bike you could take down a cow trail if you wanted to, very at home on a dirt road, and you would have a sort of a mixture of a tire on it. This kind of a vintage tire over here on this Horex is a great example of what you would find on the early tires of the 60s and 70s Scramblers. The street tire that has enough tooth in it to handle some dirt. And over here you have another Scrambler, Triumph Scrambler, that has actual dirt tires on it, but with, they're not the most aggressive dirt. So that's a street legal dirt tire that you'd put on that. So there's a whole pedigree of this world of riding on and off road. It's now become the GS BMWs of the 80s and the whole ADV bikes of the 90s and 2000s, and now we're in the teens and the 20s with ADV bikes being a huge submarket of the world. And this fits somewhere in that world. Now, I'd be interested, if you're watching this, if you have one of these or have friends who ride these things and you actually ride them as ADV bikes. I would be really curious to hear that, if that's something that is worthwhile, because it's a little bit smaller than Ducati's other offerings for the off-road market, or the on-off-road market. It's kind of interesting. I tend to see these bikes as urban scramblers, getting around, maybe back roads, but a lot of city stuff, and commuters rather than long-distance tourers. That might be different with the newer ones, which, again, as I said, they're 1100 cc. They put the big motor in it, and you can do a lot more. You pound a lot more pavement with that kind of a displacement on it. Yeah, that's about it. That's this Ducati Scrambler. It's in here, so this thing only has 800 miles on it. And the service we're doing is changing belts because it was sitting, putting tires on it because the tires are too old. But this thing is almost showroom fresh, other than the dust and fingerprints we have on it. A little bit of storage. There's a dent that happened somewhere along its life. But if this was to be detailed and cleaned up, it would look brand spanking new almost. And it's got a lot of life in it, so the customer's going to have a good time with it. Chime in if you love these things. If you hate these things, let me know. If you share my apprehensions about the value proposition of owning a Ducati, let me know. I do love them. I'm not talking any trash about Ducatis in general, but you have to be careful of when you get into one, be ready for the maintenance costs, because if you don't do the maintenance, it gets very expensive when you have engine failures happen. And if you do, it's going to cost you as you go. But they're like nothing else. The Desmo twin motor is really, really unique. Dry clutch, all that stuff sounds good. Actually, this one may not have a dry clutch. Before I speak, yeah, that one doesn't. So some of them do, some of them don't. I would say that's a negative that it doesn't have the dry clutch. I love that metal on metal catastrophic failure sound that they give. But some of the mechanics here absolutely hate it because it does sound wrong. So yeah, thanks for watching. And please like and subscribe if you haven't, and we will see you next time.